Welcome back to FactBloom Insights. The end of World War II left the world in ruins and divided into two spheres of influence, led by superpowers with very different ideologies. On one side was the United States, champion of democracy and capitalism, and on the other was the Soviet Union, champion of communism and authoritarianism. The stage was set for a new global conflict, but this time it would be fought not with guns and bombs, but with ideas and influence. This is the story of how the Cold War changed everyday life. How did the Cold War change everyday life? Well, let's start with what you put on your face. In 1947, Americans were shocked to learn that Soviets had developed a synthetic rubber substitute from wood pulp called rayon. They feared that if the Soviets could make synthetic rubber, they could also make synthetic Americans. To combat this threat, the US government funded massive research projects to develop new types of plastics, like nylon and polyester, so that Americans could keep wearing those blue jeans. Meanwhile, the British took a slightly different approach. They banned synthetic fabrics entirely. In 1948, Winston Churchill declared, "We shall go back to cotton and woolens." But of course, they still needed something to replace those pesky Russians, so they turned to good old-fashioned propaganda. In Britain, Uncle Sam was replaced by a chap named Captain Britain, who appeared on everything from breakfast cereals to beer mats to teach Brits about the evils of communism. But no Cold War story would be complete without a visit from Uncle Joe. The US government created its own propaganda campaign featuring this cartoon. Uncle Joe. He explained the benefits of capitalism to millions of American schoolchildren. What are those benefits, you ask? Well, for starters, capitalism is great because it means everyone can get rich, even the commies. That's right, capitalism is so great that it'll save the commies. It does that by making them rich. Speaking of saving the world, let's talk about baseball. You see, after World War II, Americans were worried that the Soviets might try to control the world by controlling baseball, specifically. They feared that the Soviets would brainwash our ball players into defecting, and then use their inside knowledge to help their team win the World Series. Now, we don't know if this ever actually happened, but we do know that at least one player defected. In 1946, a Brooklyn baseball player named Herb Score suddenly found himself on a train heading east. As it turns out, he wasn't defecting to the Soviets, but rather returning home to see his sick mother. But when he got off the train in New York, he was greeted not by his mother, but by two FBI agents who brought him straight to Washington, D.C., where they interrogated him for 12 hours. Turns out the FBI had received an anonymous tip that he was a Soviet spy and was planning to defect during the game. And while they never did find any evidence of Score's supposed espionage, they did find something else. A really good angle for a Cold War PSA. In the years following World War II, Americans were regularly bombarded with messages about the dangers of communism, often without knowing it. For example, there was the infamous "Beware of Communists" poster, which was displayed in classrooms across the country. It featured a list of suspicious activities, including attending meetings of foreign organizations and criticizing the government. There was also the Red Scare, or the Second Red Scare, depending on who you talk to. This was a period of intense anti-communist paranoia that began in the late 1940s and lasted until the early 1950s. During this time, thousands of suspected communists and suspected sympathizers were investigated by the government, and many of them lost their jobs. Of course, none of this would have been possible without the help of the media. Newspapers and magazines published stories about alleged communist spies, and the government even created a special committee to investigate subversive activities in the movie industry. But perhaps the most insidious way that the Cold War affected everyday life was through the development of nuclear weapons. On August 6, 1945, the United States dropped an atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. 3 days later, they dropped another bomb on Nagasaki. Within a few weeks, Japan surrendered and World War II was over. But the world would never be the same again. For the first time in history, humans had the power to destroy each other and the planet itself. And that meant that every day could be your last. The only question was, how would it end? Would it be a nuclear holocaust or mutually assured destruction? Or maybe the Cold War would just drag on forever? Well, luckily for us, the Cold War didn't end in a nuclear blast, but it did come pretty close. In 1962, the world held its breath as the US and the USSR prepared for a showdown in Cuba. It all started when the Soviets decided to place missiles on the island of Cuba. Just 90 miles from the US mainland, this would give them the ability to strike much of the United States with relatively short-range missiles. The US government responded by blockading the island and demanding that the Soviets remove the missiles. For 13 tense days, the world watched as the two superpowers prepared for war. But in the end, cooler heads prevailed and the Soviets backed down. It remains one of the closest calls in human history. And it was all because of a series of unfortunate events that led to the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Just kidding, it had nothing to do with that. But seriously, what would you do if you were the leader of a superpower on the brink of nuclear war? If you're John F. Kennedy, you'd write some poetry. That's right. In the midst of the Cuban Missile Crisis, Kennedy penned these immortal lines. "I'm the leader of the free world. It's my duty to defend it, to protect it. I will not falter." Of course, he didn't actually write that. Those words came from an unattributed source within the White House. But that doesn't mean Kennedy wasn't thinking along the same lines. In fact, he told his brother Robert that he wanted to be remembered as the man who moved in the missile crisis. And move he did. Kennedy's actions during the Cuban Missile Crisis helped to end the standoff with the Soviets and prevent a nuclear war. He was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1963, though it is unclear whether that was for this particular event or for his work on the Peace Corps. Either way, it's safe to say that he won the award for his handling of the Cold War, but not everyone was so lucky. Take, for example, Gary Powers. In May 1960, Powers was flying a US spy plane over the Soviet Union when his plane was shot down. He managed to eject safely but was quickly captured by the Soviets. And when they searched the wreckage of his plane, they found something that would change the course of the Cold War. A camera containing hundreds of top-secret photographs of Soviet airspace. Powers was paraded around the Soviet Union as a war hero, and he was given a 10-year sentence in a labor camp. But the Soviets knew that they had something that could embarrass them on the world stage. So they made a deal with the CIA to exchange Powers for a Russian spy named Rudolf Abel. Powers returned to the US a hero, and he spent the rest of his life writing books and appearing on talk shows. And while he became a celebrity, the same could not be said for Abel. After being traded, he was sent to prison for espionage, where he served almost 5 years before being released. So there you have it, just a few ways that the Cold War changed everyday life. From the clothes we wore, to the sports we played, to the food we ate, to the jobs we had, to the president we elected, the Cold War had an impact on every aspect of American life. And it was until long after the conflict ended that we began to understand just how pervasive its influence had been. What did you think of the ways that the Cold War changed everyday life? Let us know in the comments below.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to follow the next videos.